church said. Amen. Sing and talk about the greatness of God. But before I start my sermon today, I have got to give two things. I got to do two things I couldn't do last week because the electricity went out and all of our electronic devices quit working. But a couple of weeks ago, I talked about a picture I was looking for, which we were talking about a psalm of Asaph, and it said that God had smoke coming out of his nostrils. And I was telling you about the struggle I had finding a picture I could put up here of a smoke, of something with smoke coming out of its nostrils, because all I could find was a dragon, and a dragon didn't really do that well. So Catherine Claude came up with a picture of a bull with smoke coming out of its nose, and I thought that was really cool. So I was going to give a shout out to Catherine and tell her about that. Now, there's another shout out I have to give. This one's really good. So when Asaph was a cymbal player, so those are finger cymbals that you would put on your fingers. And then Travis one day said, well, this is what I think about when I think about cymbals. And Reggie, this has sound. So here is somebody else doing cymbals. Holy
smoke, Barn, what are you trying to do? That's fine.
I'll say it with music.
All right, so if you want to think about Psalms of Asaph, you can even think about finger cymbals, or if you want to think about getting used to much larger cymbals and just using those to play, that'll be okay too. But when you think about Asaph, Asaph was the cymbal player, and he wrote all of these really incredible psalms. And today we're going to look at Psalm 76. It's to the choir master with stringed instruments, played with accompaniment, a song of Asaph, a song. And he starts this way. He says, in Judah God is known. His name is great in Israel. His tent is in Salem. His dwelling place is in Zion. And one of the things that Asaph is going to tell us about God is that there is no one comparable to God. God has no equal. When we start thinking about the greatest of something, we call those GOATs, by the way, the greatest of all time, right? And we usually think in terms of sports. So I started thinking, okay, who are greatest of all time? So in football, some people would say Tom Brady, okay? Some of us who have more of a Tennessee background would say Peyton Manning, right? And somebody might say Terry Bradshaw. I don't know who you would consider the greatest football player of all time. I mean, James Brown comes to mind. There's a lot of people who come to mind and you think, hey, these were really great football players. I tried to come up with a baseball player, but I don't know baseball very well. So I asked my baseball expert, Grant, and Grant came up with Babe Ruth. I had written down Babe Ruth. I had Willie Mays written down. And a modern player that I had written down, and I thought it was interesting, Grant said he didn't get a whole lot of attention, Mike Trout. So I had him written down. Man, if you're talking about stock car racing, man, I can talk to you about stock car racing, right? Because long ago, you would have said Richard Petty because he had 7 championships. And then Dale Earnhardt came along, and you would have said, well, maybe Dale Earnhardt, but that's a pretty good debate whether it's Richard Petty or Dale Earnhardt, who also had 7 championships, was the greatest of all time. But now you have Jimmy Johnson, who had 7 championships. So now you got this 3-way debate about who's the greatest driver of all time. I don't have any idea. Right, I know it's not me, but Jeff Gordon. Now, he only had 4 championships. He doesn't get in there. So you look at all of that, and you start thinking, okay, we start thinking about who's the greatest in certain things. We think about great world leaders, right? Like if you were going to ask me great presidents, I'd put Ronald Reagan on the list. You know, some people put John F. Kennedy on the list. Great world leaders, I'd probably put Winston Churchill on the list. I mean, there are a lot of great world leaders who have been through the generations. We were fortunate one time to go to Corinth and also to Ephesus. And this is a picture that Diane took of the Temple of Apollo in ancient Corinth. What do you notice about the Temple of Apollo in ancient Corinth? Here's another picture of it with the Acropolis in the background. There's not much left, is it? There's not much to the Temple of Apollo. In Paul's day, there might have been a debate on that Corinthian square about who is greater, God or Apollo. I want to let you know, God is greater than Apollo was. There is the Temple of Artemis that is outside of Ephesus, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And guess what's left of the Temple of Artemis outside of Ephesus? One column. One column. You want to know the cool thing about that column? It's not original, it's man-made. They put it there so you would know where the temple was, so when tourists came, they would know, oh yeah, there was the Temple of Artemis. Actually, there's not anything left of it except the temple, the one column that we put in kind of to mark the spot, from what I understand. That's what they told me when I was standing there anyway. Does God have an equal? No, God has no equal. There's not anyone like God. There's nobody comparable to God. And God displays His majesty through His church. You know, if you go back to that first verse, in Judah, God is known. His name is great in Israel. Those people who knew God were making His name great. And a question for the church is, are we displaying God's majesty through who we are, through what we do? Because God is great and His majesty is known through His church. Well, if you look around at the world, very honestly, the world looks like it's in pretty much of a state of rebellion against God to me. And we have a host of moral issues that they seem to be taking over. You know, questions about abortion and questions about LGBTQ issues. There's marriage is just really get kind of a bad rap, isn't it? I mean, honestly, I don't know how else to say it. Things like oppression of the poor, those who are disadvantaged being taken advantage of. All moral issues against God that seem to permeate our society. If you look around at our world, it almost looks like we have a general lack of need for God. At least that's our impression. The world figures it can just fix everything. Man is just consumed with his own self-importance. We have financial issues, man can fix that. We can do it by law. Look at how many things we try to fix by law. I'm not saying law is bad, law is good. But when you start looking at humanity and where humanity is going, you have to realize that there is no equal to God. I love 1 Corinthians chapter 3. Let no one deceive himself. If anyone among you thinks he is wise in this age, let him become a fool that he may become wise. For the wisdom of the world is folly with God, for it is written, He catches the wise in their craftiness. And again, the Lord knows the thoughts of the wise, they are futile. Let no one boast in men, for all things are yours. And that's a great verse. All things belong to God. And God displays that majesty through who we are. The church, through the church, the manifold wisdom of God is being displayed in the heavenly realms. I mean, just think about that verse for a second. Through the church, the manifold wisdom of God is being displayed to the heavenly realms. If people want to see what God is really like, you know who they should be able to look at? The church. Thank you, Charlie. Charlie's answering back there, right? The church. They should see that reflected in us because we're becoming the image of God. If the church wants to see the patience of God, where should they see the patience of God? In the church. If God sees compassion for the poor, where should it see compassion for the poor? In the church. If the world needs to see a group of people who are dedicated to following the Word of God, where should they see that? They should see it in the church. We are the manifold wisdom of God. You know, he continues in this psalm. I don't want to read verses 4. I tell you what, let's just read verse 1 through verse 7. If you don't have a Bible, just kind of follow along, but this is a great psalm. In Judah, God is known. His name is great in Israel. His abode has been established in Salem. His dwelling place is in Zion, which was the place where those are both words used for Jerusalem. So God was seen to dwell in Jerusalem, and That's kind of the point of the first point of this lesson. Where does God dwell now? Does he dwell in Jerusalem? Well, God is everywhere, right? But God dwells in his church. He dwells in us. There he broke the flashing arrows, the shield, the sword, and the weapons of war. Glorious are you, more majestic than the mountains full of prey. The stout-hearted were stripped of their spoil. They sank into sleep. All the men of war were unable to use their hands. At your rebuke, O God of Jacob, both rider and horse lay stunned. But you are to be feared. Who can stand before you once your anger is roused? There's a couple of things in those verses I want to point out. The first is this idea of glorious are you. How many of you have a translation that's not English Standard Version? We have interactive sermons here at Clarksville Highway, right? Anybody got a New International Version, 1984? New International Version, 84. You have that, Fred?
Yeah.
Okay, what does it say besides glorious are you?
Which verse again?
Verse 4.
You are resplendent with light.
Ah, that's it. You're resplendent with light. Oh, I like that. You're resplendent with light. So glorious are you. You're resplendent with light. The idea here is God is glowing with such great light. He is such a divine presence that it's unlike the mountains of prey. And we really struggle with how to translate this verse in a couple of ways. The mountain of prey could be the mountain that's full of the kind of prey that you have. So it'd be like a mountain full of game if you're going and hunting for food. But more likely, it's the mountains that are full of the prey of those who are against God. When God shows up to do war, when God shows up to defend himself, when God shows up to defend those who trust in him, who is going to stand in God's way? Nobody. You just shake your head like this, right? God is resplendent with light. There is no one like God. Now, when you read the context of this psalm, some think this psalm is about the things that occurred when Sennacherib came to attack Jerusalem. Do you remember that story? Sennacherib, Hezekiah is a king, and Sennacherib shows up to attack Jerusalem, and he says, you better not trust in God. Because this is the Greg Smith paraphrase, okay, the Greg Smith version of the story. You can go back and read this later and get the original version. Today, you just get to listen to the Greg Smith version. And he says, you better not trust in the gods like other nations have trusted in their gods, because where are their gods? I took them all captive. And if you think your God is going to deliver you, your God's not any different than those gods were. And remember Hezekiah, he goes and he prays. And he's struggling with that. God, what am I going to do with this? He lays it out before God. God says, don't you worry about it. I'll take care of it. And so he sends messengers a second time and said, look, don't trust Hezekiah when he says God is going to deliver you, because God will not deliver you from me, because no one has been delivered from me. It's king of Assyria. He is the biggest kid on the block at the time. Do you remember in the story what happened? Man, when God shows up, 185,000 Assyrian soldiers dead. Overnight. No battle, no fight. Not there. Killed. This idea that Asaph has when he talks about all the men of war were unable to use their hands, the stout-hearted, those who were strong of heart, those who thought a lot of themselves, they were stripped of their spoil. That the very thing that they came to get was taken away from them. And they sank into sleep. They couldn't even find their hands. Couldn't even use them. You think the king of Assyria was wrong when he said, oh, your God's not going to deliver you. Your God's just like every other God that we have fought against. Because the God of Israel was not like every other God they had fought against. When God shows up, there is no one who can stand in his way. There is no one who can stand before him. God's enemies cannot defeat him. He is going to be victorious every time. You know, Timothy says that, when Paul writes to Timothy, he says that God dwells in unapproachable light. Have you ever just sat and thought, man, what does God look like? I've tried, I can't come up with anything except unapproachable light. The splendor of God. So God's enemies can't defeat him. So who can stand before him? How about a nation? Man, we got some really great nations in our world, don't we? Really strong, powerful nations. We're one of them. United States, Great Britain, Russia, China. I mean, just you can list the great nations of the world, right? If God chooses to do war with the great nations of the world, which one of them can stand? None. We have some world leaders who think they are incredibly powerful. And in human terms, they are incredibly powerful. But if you compare them to God, who are they? They are as if they are nothing because of the greatness of God. Man, we got a lot of philosophies in our world, don't we? We have a lot of philosophies. We have a lot of political ideas. All of the human wisdom, if you stack it up against God, it is nothing. Because the wisdom of the world cannot scratch the surface of the wisdom of God. So how does that help us? God has no equal. And maybe the best way to say it, if I put a slide up here for this, so skip that. God protects those who serve him. Is God fully capable of protecting you? He is fully capable. Can God protect you against Satan? Yes. Satan will be destroyed and defeated. Can God protect you against sin? I mean, it's the plague of mankind, right? Sin separates us from God. But God, through Jesus, took care of sin so that we're completely saved. One of the things that people in the world fear more than anything else besides public speaking is death. Did God take care of death? Yes. God has no equal. There is nothing in this world that you will face that God is not capable of handling. Ephesians chapter 6. Just listen. You can just listen to these verses. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Who do we fight against? Is our fight with this world? No. Our fight's not with this world. Our fight's against the evil forces that present themselves in the world. God has no equal. If you go back to Psalm 76. But you are to be feared. Who can stand before you when your anger is roused? From the heavens you uttered judgment. The earth feared and was still. When God rose to establish judgment, to save all the humble of the earth. Now, when God rose for judgment, why did he rise for judgment? I just want you to get that in that last verse. To save all the humble of the earth. That's us. God rises for salvation. God rises to rescue us. So the question again, is God able to rescue? God is able to rescue. Now, God protects his chosen. Now, there's this interesting verse in verse 10. It's just a difficult verse. Can we just say some verses in the Bible are just difficult verses? This is a difficult verse. Surely the wrath of men shall praise you. The remnant of wrath you will put on like a belt. And you get to that point in the psalm and you scratch your head and you think, what in the world does that mean? So here's my best shot, okay? Here's my best shot. No matter how mad the world gets at God, no matter how much wrath mankind has against God, ultimately, all of mankind will praise God. Even mankind in his wrath. Even as angry as he might be. Even as upset with God as he might be. Even as rebellious against God as he might be. Ultimately, everyone will praise God. And the remnant of wrath you will put on like a belt. And some says that the remnant will be throttled or they won't be wrathful anymore. It's really struggled to translate that. But it's almost as if Asaph is saying, and all of that wrath that mankind can have against you, God, you put that on like a belt, like a decoration. You wear it like almost like a crown, because God is going to take care of all of that. So who's to be feared? And God said He is the one to be feared. After man has done everything that man can do, God will still stand. No matter how much the world, rejects God, God will still stand. No matter how much we think about who God is, or how much we might argue that He doesn't exist, or how much we might say about anything, God will still stand. Because God puts an end to the defiant, the arrogant, the tyrants, those who are feared, the kings of the earth, who cuts off the spirits of princes, and who is to be feared by the kings of the earth. So what do? We serve an awesome God. And Asaph gives great advice. You make vows to the Lord your God, and you fulfill them. When you make a vow to God, you fulfill your vow. If you say to God, God, I am going to do, you fill in the blank, you make sure you fulfill the vow that you make to God. In fact, what Asaph would tell you is, you know the most important thing you can do in this world? You can make a vow to God. You can make a promise to God. You can say, God, I will honor you with everything that I am going to do. Asaph looks at all the people in the world and all the things that are going to happen, and you know what he says? Everybody's going to bring a gift to God. Everybody is bringing a gift to God because God has no equal. There is no one comparable to Him. When all of life is said and done, when you filtered through everything that you do in your existence on this earth, the only thing that will matter at the end is your relationship with God. So we said God is wrapped in light, right? But then God describes Himself as a lamb. A lamb. I love in Revelation it says they will make war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will overcome them because He is Lord of lords and King of kings. And with Him will be His called, chosen, and faithful followers. When you think about a lamb, you don't really think that as being a mighty war weapon, do you? A lamb. But the Lamb will be victorious because He is King of kings and Lord of lords. And the Lamb will be victorious because it is that Lamb who gave His blood on the cross for our sin as Passover lamb. So that we stand before a God who is incomparable. A God who looks at us and with a tremendous amount of love says, I have chosen you for you to be mine. I want you to know as we close the lesson, your service to God will be rewarded. There is nothing greater in this life than to serve God. Do not miss your calling. If you need to respond in some way,